Yeah, that's the way to do it. Be cognizant of it.
Microphones now live. Tell that the camera is now on and we are now connected to channel 20.
Okay, so
You can be here or there, whichever you like.
Sit at the table, it'd be easier for them. Go for it.
all right, so call to order. Let's stand for the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I'd like to make a motion that we accept this agenda, unless anyone has additions. All in favor?
Wait, we're already seconded on,
Second on for the village.
We each have to do
Okay,
it.
sorry.
It's actually open. So I'm gonna move to
Got it.
open.
Yes.
The second. Aye.
You gotta say the pledge again.
Well, anyhow, I'll second if we need a second for this agenda. I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor, village.
Aye.
Do we accept the agenda? Second. All in favor? Aye.
Okay. I have an announcement. As of 12/31, there will be no more park and ride parking options at the lot at 32 North. There'll be some forthcoming information regarding that parking area. And Katie, could you post that on our website and social media?
And to clarify, 12/31 is a date, not a time of day?
12/31/2015.
Okay, cool.
And that's a result. That's a result of the county DOT is no longer funding use of that parking lot for park and ride or commuter parking. Another update I had, just with the continuation of hydrants, Plattekill and Lookout Hydrant was turned back online on Monday, and the parts for the hydrant across from Family of New Paltz on 32 North came in today. Blue, our superintendent, plans to turn that hydrant back on Thursday. And anyone have additional announcements? Nope. Okay, public comment? Nope. So first item on our business agenda is this sub-recipient discussion regarding the New York Rising project. We actually, I think in a note that I shared with both the town and the village, we don't need a sub-recipient relationship with DASNY because DASNY already has such a sub-recipient relationship with the governor's office, and we're looking to move forward with the hardening of the sewage treatment plant down on Huguenot Street, as well as there's another New York Rising project related to inflow and infiltration improvements for both the village and the town. But what we would need is a right of entry agreement. So that was circulated with the town and the village. What I'd like to do is just forward this on to our attorney to take a look, and then we can move forward with signing this agreement to give DASNY the right of entry to check out our sewage treatment plant.
Can we pass this pending a legal review and authorize the mayor and the supervisor then to sign immediately after legal review, so it doesn't have to come
I'm imagining that
back
we're
before
each
us again?
I'm imagining that we're each doing our own separate signatures regarding this. So I'm fine with what you described for the village.
Is the town, Tim, a party to that agreement? Is there a signature line for Susan on that?
This is just a blank document. I would assume.
I think we're gonna have to, yeah. All right, so I'm willing to move that the town authorize the supervisor, deputy supervisor to execute the document that you have a form of there after legal review. Fine with that.
I'll move the same thing for the village.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Technical question. Do we need to have government order review as well? That seems like
I
a
think
necessary.
maybe one attorney, it's mostly village property anyway, so I think.
Yeah.
But I think to cover us, there may be some,
Joe might think, that's okay. I mean, if he wants to look it up.
okay, so,
You have review, you'll send it to L'Oreal.
sure. Next item has to do with some projects we're applying for grant money from the county related to 3 individual projects. One, it's a $85,000 study regarding event parking and traffic. The other study is a $40,000 proposal where we're looking to make improvements to the rail trail, particularly in the village corridor. And then the third is a $15,000 study that we would be asking for assistance regarding the newly created or named NBR district, which is the B3 district on 32 North, and that would have to do with identifying capital facility improvements for water, sewer, green infrastructure, bicycle ped. Our village board approved that we would move forward with a letter of support. So I'm just bringing this up because I'm asking the town board to also, we could provide a template for a letter of support, just, we wanted to have a verbal resolution.
I'm going to move on behalf of the town, that the town board authorize the supervisor or deputy supervisor to execute a joint letter of support for the 3 grants that you just outlined on the record.
Great.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Perfect. Next item is this proposed town and village master plan committee. So I shared with you a resolution that the former town and village boards passed. There was a hiccup along the way where the third-party consultant who was being used didn't follow through, so that project kind of stopped dead in its tracks. But what I'm suggesting is that we use the resolution that the town and village had used previously. We change the date, we keep all the terms the same, even including the money, because it's kind of a range. It says up to a maximum of $26,000 for each governmental entity.
We have $25,000 in the 2016 budget for this. So I would.
You want to change the wording to 25?
50,000 and 25, if that's okay.
Tim, did the mayor ever sign off on that document you circulated? No?
The notice that we had was that it was not signed at the time.
This is all that I would come up with.
Yeah, I just saw what was circulated. And also,
Susan had signed it.
But I know that there were payments made to that third-party planner, but that's a,
no reason why it can't be executed now as of that date anyway.
Back to the date as of. So are you saying that just the village board passed a resolution to have the present mayor execute this agreement? With-
but don't you think there's an issue with with the modifications? Because this is talking about that the coordinated comprehensive plan be done, I think it was by the end of 2014.
Yes.
So we have to change that date.
So then how do you want to proceed? You want to try to update this for execution by both the mayor and supervisor again?
Yes.
Maybe at our next meeting?
Next joint meeting.
Well,
Or
is there
even
anything else-
our individual meetings.
Is there
Just
anything else we need beyond the amendments that you just spoke about with this contract, or with this resolution?
I think all we're changing are the dates and, as Marty suggested, the dollar amount.
So then is there any reason why we can't just pass that tonight?
Well, I think we're reaffirming the commitment tonight to that, but I think we should have it all flushed out.
That's fine. Yep.
And we'll pass it in one of our next meetings.
Sounds good. Thank you for that.
Payments under number 3, it's specifying how much payments are to be made on specific dates, but since we don't have a consultant identified, we don't have a schedule.
That was
Right.
done pursuant to his request, so that he would have timely payments over the course of the project. You're right, so it doesn't really apply,
Well, that's not the resolution that I'm looking to adopt. It's the last page, so I think,
I'm looking at.
Yeah.
what Susan approved, which is what we were chatting about just now, about modifying it.
well, actually, this final page of what you have there doesn't include that discussion or timeline regarding
Right,
payments.
there's a resolution, and then there's an actual agreement, an agreement between the town and the village to pursue.
Yeah.
So both of these documents then need to be,
I would just update them and reaffirm that individual.
Yeah, so
We'll put that
let-
for our next town agenda.
we can update them and recirculate.
And then I also wanted to move forward with the committee members, and the thinking is that we have a 9-person group who would be the working group representing folks in the community, and they would essentially construct an RFP, then work with the third-party consultant who's identified, and then be responsible for communicating back to both the town and the village during the, let's say, approximately 12-month period that third-party consultant is working on this project. But Marty and I identified some names and spoke with these individuals. I believe there's an update. I got a note, and you guys may have also received it, from Planning Board Chair of the town, Mike Calamano, who was suggesting Adele Ruger be the town planning board representative on this 9-person committee. And we had spoken about this as a village board in terms of these individuals. We have to find a village planning board member. I've spoken with Michael Zeeler about it. He's definitely interested in being kept in the loop, but maybe not necessarily being the official planning board representative on this committee, but I don't think we'll have any trouble finding someone.
I don't need it.
But I wanted to move forward with these 9 individuals. I kind of intentionally and unintentionally didn't try to have town and village representatives, but if you look at this group, I think it's a really great cross-section
There's a great amount of diversity.
of people with,
a lot of talent.
and, yeah.
So are you looking for us to, are we looking to move forward and formally accept that as the committee tonight?
Yes, I wanted both boards to.
So I feel comfortable with that list. You and I have spoken about it as well. I think it's a great group, and you and Marty have worked on that too.
So the only person who hasn't essentially accepted it was the village planning board member?
Right, the village, we have not identified who that would be. So that would either be someone who is on our planning board or our alternate, who we recently named as Bill Murray.
Could we put this on for 15 or 20 minutes from now so that the full board is here? I know that Susan's on her way, Jeff's on her way. Just so that.
Totally.
everybody has their
Yeah,
input.
that's fine.
Okay, so we'll swing back to that.
Mr. Mayor?
Did you want to make a comment on this
It's not
one?
a complaint, just a question. Generally, the board has an opportunity to interview people before we appoint them. And don't see any strong need, but is there a reason we're not following our usual process? I'm not insisting that we do, I'm just,
My thinking is just that these are all known entities. You know, Bob Hughes, Gail Gallery, Fran Wishnick, Bill Murray, Rich Gottlieb, Peter Fairweather. I mean,
I just want to
Yep.
reserve the right in the future if we should feel the desire to
You want to just read the
interview
names for the
people.
record?
Names into the record.
sure. So the town board member would be Adele Ruger, village board, planning board member to be announced, Huguenot Street representative. The president of Huguenot Street is Marietta Schneider, and then Josephine Bloodgood. They actually were interested in kind of splitting the responsibility, which I'm very comfortable with. And then we have Bob Hughes, Gail Gallery, Fran Wishnick, Bill Murray, Rich Gottlieb, Peter Fairweather. So that's 9.
I get one point that we already have Bill Murray on the list, and we just spoke about having him as.
That's fine, so we can't use him
I just
twice.
wanted to point that out.
Thanks. So we,
Would each of our boards need to appoint a liaison to this committee?
that's probably prudent.
That's what I observed and do that with other committees that the town has established. I'm not sure what your procedure is.
It had been, when we originally started this process, it had been a committee of elected officials who then would have gone to create a committee like that. Unfortunately, we never got that far. So I do think it would be appropriate to have a representative from each. I don't know if they'd be voting members, probably just oversee.
Yeah, I don't think they should be voting
I agree
members.
with you.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. And a big part of being a liaison to any committee or any entity is just having that communication where, you know, if there's a question regarding something with the town or village, the board liaison can usually answer those questions more readily, and then vice versa, if there's questions to be brought back to either board, so I think it's a good idea.
So then when we have our meeting passes, would that be the?
Yeah, we could assign someone to do that, absolutely. You sound like you're volunteering already, Marty. Okay, great. No, thank you for putting that together.
Okay, so anyone else want to comment before we wait for Susan or Jeff to offer some opinion? Okay, so then let's jump ahead to Municipal Center. I believe Marty had some notes he wanted to share with us.
Sorry that I didn't circulate these ahead of time.
I have.
Thank you.
Marty, use the mic.
As everybody knows, we've been working diligently to come together and do a new municipal center. I just wanted to give an update of where things are. And I'm sure if anybody thinks otherwise, they'll correct me. Joe Hurwitz has been identified as the architect. He was identified unanimously by the Municipal Space Committee as the architect that they recommended, and we agreed with that. George Seafried, is this one not on?
It doesn't sound fair.
Oh, okay. No problem. George Seafried, oh, this sounds very different. George Seafried and I spent quite a few hours on both Tuesday and Wednesday of last week with Joe Hurwitz going over the contract proposal that he had given us previously to try to finalize it. And we did. Joe has created that final version. I received it yesterday, but didn't see it till this morning since I was at a conference all day yesterday. We expect that will be acceptable or will be modified in some minor fashion to make it acceptable. And it's my goal to have that on the next town board meeting, which is on the 19th, to be executed. He's already agreed to do the work. We've already agreed to engage him. We've set aside $50,000 so that he has funds in order to take him through the first phase of his design, which is called schematic design. And the first portion of that schematic design phase is programming, when he comes and does interviewing of town and village departments to learn what their present spaces are and how those relate to what there ought to be in the future. And he has agreed that he will be finished with that by December 1st, a date that I have put forth not as a date, but as a concept. When will the architect be done with his programming? I visualize that as an important date for us to make sure we're all together and going forward, and we've worked through our business discussions. There is a little bit of information that will help the architect. Tim, this is a chart that would show what the layout is of the folks in the village. And I emailed it to you last week, so he's going to start his program. He expects next Monday. So if you could have that available for him whenever.
A completed chart.
Well, yeah, just similar. Penciled in was what I had sent to you. It was just, in our case, the trailer layout and who was in each of those offices. and what their function was. Yeah. So then the next to talk about is the legal structure, and we've made a lot of progress on this. We have had conversations with numbers of folks, including with bond counsel, whose name is Ken Bond, and he's served both the village and the town previously, so he's a known entity to all of us. And in our discussions, we were talking about the needs that we have to come together jointly, and how we might structure an arrangement to make sure we were doing it as cost effectively as possible. And this particular approach of creating a local development corporation, LDC, seems to be what he advocates. And by doing so, we would then be at liberty to hire a general contractor or a construction manager, and we could do that through either a negotiating or a bid process. And by doing so, then, because of creation of this entity, a single-purpose entity, would do nothing else but own the building. And borrow money, yes, that's correct. And we would then not be constrained by the requirements of the Wicks law. We're not creating a wheel. It's used over and over and over again. It's used for the same purpose. And it's something that, as I understand it, were we to seek grants, for example, from state sources, that we would not be looked at negatively for having elected this form of ownership. I don't know that there are any grants that are available, and I can only pass on that anecdotally.
And the LDC may be able to borrow more favorably than the municipalities could as well.
Yes.
That's another advantage.
Yes. We were told that the most likely term of bonds would be 20 years, and an unknown interest rate, but was it 3.5% to 4.5% that he threw out as a possible range? We're not sure what it is, but something in that area, and we can't know that, I don't think, until someplace down the road. What is threshold, as I see it, for us to get on the same page is what is the ownership interest of each of the town and the village? And it's not an easy topic to get our arms around, and there's lots of reasons why among 10 of us on the two boards we might come to be in different groups that have different perspectives, but I tried to outline what I think are three possible ways to approach this. And one is owning it equally. I have heard comments from village board members primarily, but it doesn't matter that that's where I heard them, that there's a strong interest perhaps in owning it equally. I could see owning it equally. We'd have to discuss what are the consequences of owning it equally. Another would be for us
The mayor does not want to own it equally.
No, no. So it's not, like I said, there's just the options that I see that we have on the table. I see a deadline of December 1st for us to sort all of these things out, so it's timely for us to have whatever dialogue we can here and move ourselves towards coming to a consensus. A second is to base the ownership on the assessments of the tax rolls for the town and for the village, and I think that split is something around 26-74% or 24-76% or something. It's a quantified number. We don't have to debate what it is.
Would you say that's similar to how the A fund is distributed?
Precisely the same. Whatever that ratio is what I'm referring to. If I was inarticulate, but the town's A fund and the town's B fund, as distinguished from the village's fund, yes. And the third would be to look at the spaces that each of us occupies within the building and calculate, or ask the architect to calculate for us what those percentages are, and rely on that. I think that of these three, and there may be others besides these three, of these three, that's the most complicated one, because I believe we would have to then look at, well, how many square feet of office space do each of the town and village use? Do you use the same percentage on common spaces? What about the police and the court? Are they, because they're paid for by the town, should they be allocated to the town in such a ratio? And if we were to discuss my option 3,
based on use, then I believe that I'd want to explore, and I may be the only one on the town board feeling this way, I would like to then say, well, the police, we pay for all of that, but the calls were mostly in the village. So is it reasonable on a long-term basis and a mortgage for the village and the town to maintain the same arrangement that we have now in terms of the capital cost for this building, not to change anything else in statute? And similarly for the Justice Court, how are collected fines distributed between each of the town and the village? And Tim, Mayor Rogers has already apparently addressed this and found that it's a very, very small number of dollars in his research. But it's easy to find that. We go to the court, to Becky, and ask her to tell us what last year was distributed each of the town and the village. So I advocate either one or two of these. We will need to authorize the creation of the LDC. We've received draft documents from Ken Bond's office that we could use as models for creating the LDC. I haven't had a chance to review them. Tim may have had a chance to review them. They haven't been circulated to our respective councils. I think it's perhaps not quite the right time for us to try to do anything with that tonight, but as you will see, and I get to in a minute, I suggest we call another joint town board meeting on December 1st, and at that time we could have all of our ducks in a row and be prepared to take actions. You'll see I have that towards the bottom of this page. The other things that I would see us approving at that meeting would be the designation of the clerk of the works and the authorization for the hiring of the clerk. And I still have to get clear in my head who is hiring the clerk. Is it predicated on whichever of us owns a different percentage than somebody else, or are they hired by the LDC? Something I have to learn and I don't know the answer to. But they're looking out in any event for the owner, not for any of the contractors or subcontractors or the architect. They're looking out for us. We do know we need such a position because I'm not in a position to continue to do that work for the duration of this project. I'm happy to have tried to help move it forward and get it off the ground, but it's time to bring in somebody who can manage it on a pretty much day-to-day basis. There is an interview tomorrow with one possible candidate. His name is Charles Wesley. He was recommended to us by the architect, Joe Hurwitz. There is a second candidate that I am going to circulate, hopefully tomorrow, the resume for. His name is Michael Agello. Michael is somebody I've known personally and business-wise for over 30 years. He worked for me in Newburgh when I was clerk of the works for 3 office buildings for developers out of Manhattan, all done under LDCs, by the way. And Michael helped me do that. And then about 9 years ago, I worked for Michael. He had a construction company in Aspen, Colorado, and needed a policies and procedures manual for his company. He hired me to write the policies and procedures manual. He lives in Aspen, but he is moving back here. His last name is Agello, but he's part of the Adams family of Adams Fairacre Farms, and many of us know that their stores. Michael was the construction manager for the construction of their newest store in Fishkill. He was construction manager for the renovations of their other stores, including in Middletown. He was construction manager for their Newburgh store as well when it was built. And he's coming back here because his mom is elderly and he is seeking medical treatment locally. And his Adams Fairacre Farms family relationships are that business has grown to where they need somebody to be their facilities manager. So he's available. He'll be here on November 18th or 19th. To have moved here permanently then. So I would like to have him interviewed as well. So just to tell you where I am at that. Parking is the next thing I have. And I'm sorry, Susan, I have more copies of this. There's no reason I didn't give you one. By doing this jointly, we'll need more parking than the site at One Veterans Drive can accommodate, and I think we've already all chatted about this some, but just to bring everybody up to speed. There are potential issues if we make that part of a municipal center project, because then the parking would at least appear to have been created for the sole purpose of supporting a municipal center. That land is dedicated parkland in New York State. And to change its use from anything from the park and recreation allowed guidelines would require a process called alienation, where you have to go.
Just borrow spaces during the day.
That's all we're going to do, but that means that we still have to pay for it.
The park needs enhanced parking anyway.
Yeah, and that's the justification for doing it, but it should be, in my sense, it should be separate from our construction of the municipal center, contractually separate, design-wise separate. I've instructed the architect to create separate documents for that in my negotiations with him. Just that we all make sure we're on the same page, that we're comfortable with that approach. The cost for that is a separate formula, because the IMA between the village and the town stipulates that capital improvements are 50-50 share at Moriello Pool. Do I see puzzlement in your face?
This dovetails nicely with my announcement earlier about the park and ride on 32 North
Yes.
no longer being available.
Yeah.
Because that was the overflow parking lot for Moriello Pool.
Yes, one of them.
So one of them.
Colonial Arms and others were burdened with that too.
We need to improve the parking at Moriello Pool.
Yes. Yep. So I think we're probably all will end up on comfortable with that approach. The schedule, I'm proposing that we call another joint town-village board meeting on December 1st. Why December 1st? That's when the architect has committed to have his programming done so we can get his report. Then we will have finished our review of the clerk of the work candidates, and if the decision is that it's to be hired by us as opposed to the LDC, then we could take that action at that time and get the person on board. And we can pass LDC documents or authorize creation of the LDC and whatever else we are guided by Ken Bond to do. I've highlighted some things on each of your copies because I think they are the ones that mandate our attention, especially as we work towards December 1st. And the percentage of ownership, I believe, becomes key to a lot of what our understanding is with one another, which is what I spoke about earlier. So that's what I've said here. The zoning, I added this just a moment ago to remind myself to discuss it. There seems to be some difference of opinion as to whether One Veterans Drive is in a B2 or a B3 zone. So the place that it makes the biggest difference apparently is whether there's a not more than 10-foot setback or an allowable.
We can do it.
No, it doesn't matter, but we would like to
It's
be.
near the new NBR zone, but it's not in the NBR zone.
If we're not going to be constrained by zoning,
They're not.
and then we're not going to need to be before the zoning board.
I think we need to be mindful of how we've changed the zoning for NBR, and this building should be mindful of that, but.
Well, that's good. Then we don't need to be before the zoning board. We can take all of the time associated with that out of our schedule. That's great.
Yep.
Glad to have that guidance. Thank you.
No problem.
So I will leave it for all of us to discuss whatever people wish to discuss.
There's a lot there.
So I wanted to bring up right away that topic of, does that mic work? Or we only have one mic for our whole meeting?
Everything's plugged in, everything's made connection when I do.
Yeah, this is mine.
So if we were to pursue a co-ownership of 50-50 or an ownership that's of a different ratio, I think one of the challenges would be what we were discussing earlier, is then when we have this LDC board, we would have representatives from both the town and the village. So let's say, for instance, the ownership ratio was 25% village, 75% town. So what would the LDC board representation look like? And we floated this idea of two, if it's a 5-person LDC board, 2 from the village, 2 from the town, and perhaps an at-large person. But then does that mean the town and the village have equal say in LDC decisions? Or does the town have more say because the town has a greater ownership stake in the LDC? We should do this.
You might be able to enter into an operating agreement that basically locks all that stuff in. So now you're removing some of the decision-making, some of the discretion that you might be worried about with a board that isn't 50-50. So you can enter into a long-term agreement.
And so describe that further.
Well, I think what you want to do is eliminate as much potential conflict going forward. So if you can iron out all the details, you can just sign, it's like a shareholders agreement, where it's kind of an operating agreement going forward, and then you reduce the number of issues that you're likely to deal with going forward. It's just an idea.
I'd like to comment on all that, but first, I'm just a little perplexed because when we voted to move forward with this project at the last meeting, it was under the understanding that the town was going to own it and you guys were going to rent it. So I'm just really, quite frankly, shocked to sit here tonight and all of a sudden hear about an LDC and hear about equal ownership. And it's not that it might not be the right way to go. I just don't know how we went from a meeting 3 weeks ago with one plan on the table to all of a sudden here tonight talking about something completely different. So first, I'd like to understand how we got to the LDC, why we're talking about an LDC, convince me why this is the right way to go. Then I would like to then answer, I think really jumping ahead just real quick, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to if we're paying 70%, then we should have 70% say. If we're paying 50-50, then we should have 50-50 say. But, to sort of like have all the expenses for the services in the building, but then have to deal with it equally when we're paying all the money, I just don't think that's a fair. I would never enter into a business agreement like that for myself in a private business by any means whatsoever, and I don't think, Tim, you would either. So anyway.
Well, let me, Susan, at first address your statement that this was something new to you. Maybe 2 months ago, and I'd have to go back and look at records, and I threw out 2 ways that I had observed from reading that we could avoid having to pay the hard cost premium associated with the Wicks law. And of those 2 ways, one was to create what I referred to then as an SPE, a single purpose entity. The other was to hire a general contractor who would enter into a project labor agreement. This is the first of those 2. This is the special purpose entity, the SPE, and the entity is, the vehicle for that is an LDC according to Ken Bond.
Let's rotate.
Well, if I could just say real quick. I just want to say real quick in regards to, I would love to talk to Ken, but I think, and I could be wrong, that you can do PLAs without doing an LDC.
That is correct.
Okay, so doing a PLA, which I've always said I had no problem with doing PLAs, we've done that at the county many a time, does not inherently click, you got to do an LDC. So how we got to an LDC, again, my question wasn't answered. Thanks.
Does yours work?
Apparently. Checking 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? I don't know. All right.
Maybe
So-
use that.
I could hear you perfectly.
Well, thank you, Tom. Whoa! I really appreciate the supervisor making the point that she did. You went back to a couple of weeks ago when we had the rental and leasing question, and that became a difficult conversation, at least at the village level. And I think part of the reason was, in my view personally, the process that we had set up wasn't followed. That concept of renting or leasing did not come out of the executive committee process. There were 4 people, 2 from the town and 2 from the village, who were to be the executive committee. That was not a topic that came out of those meetings. It just arrived on our agenda. And I guess my question at that time was, where did this come from? And I think because that was seeming to be so difficult in terms of the village board buying in, I imagine that there was a desire to go to a different format with the LDC. And I can say I imagine because I wasn't part of those discussions either. We did meet on Saturday, and there was discussion at the executive committee of looking into an LDC and gathering information. But as I'm looking at this, there's only one option here on these notes. And I'm certainly not, I don't know enough about, and I don't have enough information or background at this point to make any sort of commitment to an LDC. There are probably people at this table who don't know what the initials stand for. It's that new. We haven't received any information in a packet. We have, and it's being presented to us as the choice. And here's how we're going to move forward with an LDC. Here's how the board's going to be set up. This is how the renting and leasing became a problem. It didn't go through the process. We didn't have enough information. We weren't brought into the discussion. So I completely am in agreement with the supervisor, and I'm extremely challenged by the expectation that all these questions will be answered within 21 days. I see that as a good goal, a worthy goal, but are we going to meet every night? Anyway, just
I'm available. Tim, I saw you nodding your head. I'd like to hear your comments on it. I saw you on the LDC and the structure. I heard.
No, I think I was. I disagree with Don that the executive committee was not discussing rent versus own. I feel like that has been kind of a very important, figuring out the ownership, whether we're renting, whether we're owning, the percentages, whether it's 50-50, a co-ownership agreement, or some other ratio where the village has a smaller stake. My interpretation of the executive committee discussions is that is what we were discussing. That's why I was shaking my head. But
I believe that the topics to be negotiated between the town and the village remain the same regardless of the ownership.
Anybody else?
I don't somewhat disagree with what Marty just said, but the way it's being presented is here's an LDC, we're moving forward on an LDC, and we have to determine the makeup of the LDC and all that, and so we are jumping ahead into technically being said this is the way we should go. Again, the last conversations I had, and I had many with Tim, many with Marty, many with George C. Free, many with Josh Honig, where it was like, because I agreed and understood that the village, let's go step back, this was an issue the town needed to address. We all know that. We're out, we're at, temporary headquarters, we're paying, for the modulars, we're paying for the heat and whatever, and people want to see a real building get built, okay? And so it was a town problem, but a number of us believe that the opportunity for the community to do a joint building is the right way to go, and if we didn't pursue it, we would be shortchanging the community. And despite how difficult it is to work as two governments together, and it doesn't matter who the people are, it's just the nature of two governments, it's easier not to work together, but it was not right for the community, which is how some of us felt, and it was worth going through the difficulty. But as we were trying to move this forward, when you guys weren't really in unison about how you really wanted to move forward, that was when we had decided last time that the town would own the building, the town would move forward, we would proceed, we would have the architect look to see what your needs are, and at a certain point, there would be a drop-dead date where you guys would have to make a decision, are you in or you're not? And then you were going to come in as renters, and we would figure out at that point, what you're, before you come in, one of the things Tim and I talked about was, while we move forward to develop this idea, and Marty starts to negotiate the contract, and we would do all that kind of stuff, that would give Tim the time to work with the board and the lawyers to figure out, okay, if we rent, okay, what's the deal, what's it gonna cost, what's the insurance, what's this, what's that, so then you guys could all feel comfortable knowing what your nut is before you sign the dotted line, and that's where it was last left. And so, well, I haven't been to the executive meetings, I've only been to a board meeting where we discussed this, we made a decision, and I have not spoken with anybody about this project since. So, I think it does still come back to, from my understanding, is that the village wants to be in on the building together. That seems to be a general consensus from the village, and, you know, okay, well, then I know Rebecca's shaking her head, I know Tom. Okay, so you guys want to be in, so the question is, how do we move forward to make it comfortable so you are in? And so it does go back to, you know, do you rent, do you own, and if so, what's the percentage of ownership, you know, or renting of the building? And that's probably the crux of the biggest issue I see for the moment is, you know, you're going to have much less space than us because, you know, now there was something Marty said tonight that was interesting, which changes the dynamics. Right now, if we pay for all the A fund, you know, the police, the justice courts, the recreation, the assessor, you know, everything we pay for that comes out of the A fund, of which 70% is paid for by the town outside the village residents, but regardless, then, you know, that's our expense, that's our cost. If all of a sudden we're looking at some of the dynamics that Marty spoke about tonight, that maybe all of a sudden, because so much of the police services are in the village, that maybe the village is going to step up to the plate now and say, okay, we're going to start to contribute to the cost of the police, and we'll pay for half of that space, and that'll be our contribution. That's a whole nother conversation, and then that opens up the gate to, well, maybe there is more equal share, because you're now sort of giving back to the town taxpayers to help for the services, that a lot of it's for the village. So, you know, but if you're shaking your head and saying no, then at the end of the day, if we're paying for 70-80% of the space, we should have 70-80% of ownership. We should be making decisions for that space, and I don't see how it could be anything different. I really don't, unless I'm missing something.
So, let's see what we can get accomplished here.
And Kevin, I apologize. Can I ask one question? Keep the mic. Is part of this, are we getting into secret in part of this? Is this fiscal part of this? Or are we getting in, once we build, will this be part of the fiscal discussion the whole community can have? And then that fiscal impact will then dictate the structure. So people within the village would have one opinion under secret, under what dollar they want coming out of their pocket. And as a town resident, I may have an opinion under secret. We have to do it regardless of what dollar comes out of my pocket. So I'm very happy that we're building a joint building. That seems to be where we are. So at what point is this structure dictated?
Well, let me just throw out a couple things first. What benefit is it to the village to own 50% of the building? That's one of the questions I have. So what is the benefit to the town owning 50% of the building? There really isn't much benefit in owning anything anymore. It's really about what it costs to operate. So, you know, when you start getting into trying to split police and do all this other stuff, now you're going down another road that we'll probably never agree on in the near term. So maybe that stuff gets handled as part of a part two in the future. I don't think there's any way you can resolve all that now. It's too complicated. So what's the village's investment going to be? Have you thought about, I mean, what's the benefit to owning 25% of the building? Is the benefit in when you sell the building, you get 25% of your money back? It'll never be sold, right? So
That's the plan.
what are we talking about here then? We're talking about probably what's the cheapest way we can build a building and jointly occupy it and deliver services more economically. I think that's what we should try to do. So I don't think it really matters who pays for what initially. You know, there's another wrinkle to this that I always have a problem with in my mind, and that is the village is in the town, but the village is a separate municipality. So you have this A fund that's designed to raise taxes from the whole town, including the village. So what part of the building is A fund money? what part of the building is B fund money and what part of the building is village money. Once you start thinking about this stuff, I've thought about it with police and everything else, and I still haven't figured it out. So this is something we need to think about. How is it going to be paid for? Is it coming out of A fund and B fund and village? I don't know. Any ideas?
If it was
I think Don.
if it was 50-50, or 75-25, or 76-24, my anticipation would be that the town would pay for whatever percentage it has out of the B fund of the town, the A fund of the town, and that the village would pay for its share out of its village fund, whatever it is labeled.
So, the one thing I do want to say is that, and Kevin brings up a number of good points here, is there still a longing, I don't think there was ever a decision from the village board whether they wanted an ownership stake in the property. So a lot of this conversation is really dependent on what you decide to do. And it doesn't appear you guys have had that conversation yet. Am I correct in saying that?
Well, I want Don to have his chance, but I will just say that we had 2 conversations, maybe 3, which is not to say that we had a decision. But we've certainly had that conversation.
Well, I keep trying to remind people, I think we already made that decision at the last joint meeting, and I keep trying to remind people, and specifically, a member of the audience, it was Josh, came to the microphone and suggested that the ownership should be split depending on the proportion of the occupancy rate. That's one of the options that we're talking about, 76-24%. And I thanked him at the time. Kevin made the point, no, we have to be full partners. We have to be equal partners moving forward. And it's all on tape. And that the discussion we had as a joint board and as our last meeting was that we would be full partners, not junior partners as the village, but full partners. And that was...
that the decision-making with respect to how the building's operated should be 50-50.
Would be done collaboratively.
Collaboratively, but not disproportionately having the town control 7 of the votes out of the 10. So I thought it should be equal representation.
Well, it was my feeling and my understanding, and having watched the tape, you know, I still feel that way, that we had agreed to move forward as full partners. To answer your question, Kevin, what bad could happen? You know, if the town owned, say, 76% and the village owned 24%. And this is not bad, what I'm about to say. It's normal, it's reasonable, it's what I would expect. Just what the supervisor said. If we're paying for 76% of the building, we're going to be calling the shots. I would expect you to. That would be appropriate. And I don't want to be in a situation where we are a junior partner. That was the whole thing going forward.
Let me ask you a question about that. Keep in mind, what does calling the shots really mean, though, in a building?
Choosing the color of the siding?
What is that? That's something you could lock in for years, too. My point is, when you're talking about a building, there aren't many shots that you really have to call. Is it going to be, who are we going to use for propane? Or is it going to be a bigger decision? The bigger decisions are, do we replace the roof, right? Major structural things, which I think you can get through. But overall, it's not a very complex thing. I don't see it to be very complex.
And the conversation's kind of changed too from that joint meeting because we didn't have a number of pieces of information at the time when we had that conversation, specifically when we talked about grant funding. We thought that we'd be eligible for significantly more funding if it was a joint venture like that. Later, we found out that wasn't the case. And then, frankly, from the town standpoint, if you guys wanted to own the building, that'd be great. We wouldn't take any of the debt associated with that, and that'd be fine by us. But
Things may have changed. I'm
yeah.
just reminding people what the basis
no,
is.
I understand. I just think it's important. Yeah, I just think it's important to also note that there was a change as well.
What I propose in terms of an ownership structure or how this building is paid for is that the A fund pays for the town's office space, the courts, and the police, and then the village contributes for its use of office space, which coincidentally is so if the architect has already eyeballed that it's approximately 25% of the building will be village office space. and that's also pretty close to this assessed value number. So we've been advised by bond counsel, it doesn't really matter what ratio you come up with. You just have to pick one and then stick with it for everything. So for every decision, you stick with that ratio. And the village is already paying for our own office space, so it feels very easy that we would continue to pay for our own office space, and that would be via our contribution to the monthly debt service. And that would be, and we'll take a look at the programming numbers that the architect comes up with, but assuming it stays within that 25% range, which as I've said is coincidentally the same assessed value range, we're pretty close. And then I would like to propose that, and it doesn't matter whether we go LDC route or just some other agreement where we are a tenant and the primary owner is the town, that decision-making is shared jointly. So we get together and we have an equal say in terms of who we choose to provide propane or who we choose to use for applying new siding in year 25 when that needs to be updated. Sure, those decisions should be made jointly. That, I think, was what Kevin was suggesting when we met and when he spoke about the idea of us working collaboratively.
And I'm sorry, Tim, long as you have the mic, no, keep the mic. So then those dollar figures would be the same. So let's just say we had to redo we've paid off the structure in 25 years?
20 years.
20 years. Year 25 hits, we need to do the roof, so it would be a 75-25 split. Assuming, like, would you still continue assuming the same?
Yeah.
And I'll ask you or Kevin, would that,
Capital improvement ratio would be the same as yours.
so this could actually give us a structure going forward that we would always know. We need new siding, we need to put in a new elevator. It would be 75-25, and it wouldn't have to be a future debate.
Kevin asked me a question before, I didn't have a chance to answer. I've actually spoken with 4 or 5, maybe 6 communities in New York State that have jointly constructed buildings and jointly occupy municipal centers. And I believe it's Akron, New York, near Buffalo. When I spoke with the supervisor up there, they are having a knockdown, drag-out fight about a salt barn. A salt barn, a barn for holding road salt. Yeah. One of them needs a lot of salt. Other doesn't need a lot of salt. It's a mundane, stupid thing. You're asking roof, siding, propane, whatever. But it's a real issue in municipal affairs.
Well, what's the issue with the salt barn?
That one municipality needs a lot of salt and wants to build a big barn. Other municipality just doesn't use much salt. They don't want to build a big barn. They don't want to pay for their share of the big barn.
You all know the size of the barn you want to build here, right? So
But
it's
my-
75-25, you're talking about running a building which is day-to-day maintenance, debt service.
But what about when you disagree or you have different agendas or different goals?
What you can do is what I said initially, is you can take all of that and put it in an agreement and try to agree on much of it in advance as you can. And if you want to designate each year an architect that selects the stuff for you, you can do that too. There's a lot of different ways. You can
That is exactly my concern about 21 days, to anticipate all the things we might want to think about, all the potential problems we could have, and come to an agreement. I want to keep this up, because I don't want to
Sorry about the December 1st, but now let's just try to.
21 days, I agree with you. 21 days is very aggressive.
I think you have to worry about the December 1st, because if you don't, it costs, the project costs more.
At least you're moving ahead. That's all you're doing.
These are not new topics.
But they're complicated issues.
They don't have
So-
to be, though. They don't really have to.
I just want there to be, I just want there to be clarity that this does not have to be done before I walk out of office, okay? And I'm more than happy to take this and hand it off to the next 2 boards and let you guys all figure it out and not have another say in this conversation. So in terms of the hard deadlines, if they work for moving things forward for the project, for the benefit of the project, okay. But if it has to do with, the ability to get stuff done. We've gotten as far as I would have hoped to have gotten. I'd like to see the building come down, but at the end of the day, I don't want deadlines dependent on the fact of who's sitting here right now, okay? That should be taken off the table. To go back to what Don is saying, and this is really scary because Don and I are agreeing on a lot tonight, and I don't disagree with a lot of like the 75-25 and all that kind of stuff, and I don't want to make things complicated. But sitting here, as we're talking about this, it's hard not to think about where the problems could arise. So, for example, and I don't want to complicate things, I just have to say, so say, for example, the town decides, well, we hired a controller, you guys might not have thought we should. I mean, I know a lot of you thought we should, but it doesn't matter. What happens if you were totally against it? We hired a controller. But all of a sudden now we decided we want to all of a sudden now have a massive recreation department, and we're going to hire 15 people because we want to make new pools, like, to have the Special Olympics, type of thing. And all of a sudden now we want to add to the building. So I'm just trying to sort of say, relative to what Don is saying, that, and I don't know how to answer it, because the problem is if we are going to get in bed together, we have to figure out how we are going to work together. And I have the same concerns you do, even though I still believe it's the right thing for the community. But in the sense, how do you make those decisions going down the road when all of a sudden the needs of one government might not be respected by the other government, but one government voted to do something, you don't want it, so now it's 50-50 decisions, and you say, tough luck, we're not adding those extra, that extra office space or something. So that's, some of the issues that I sort of see of, like, how do we, it's one thing to just sort of say, we'll all agree on the color of the siding, we'll all agree that we want solar heat, we'll all agree, that we want, this, and that, but there are those intricacies that we have to work out before we get too far down the road in terms of how do we make those decisions when the two governments don't have the same agenda.
They're made by the board. The board is composed of certain members, and they make the decisions. That's it. The question is, how many members are appointed by what government, and how many are appointed by the other government?
So do you have the...
Well, that's if you do an LDC. If you don't do an LDC, you have two boards.
What we were thinking is... a board that, let's say, composed of 5 people, 2 village, 2 town, and like an at-large individual that both the village and the town agreed to. So you have an odd number. And then that board would be responsible to decide whether you move forward with this addition because the town wants to build a new wing. Is that how you're envisioning it?
Well, let's put it this way. Your LDC has a board. That board then has the authority to make decisions on behalf of the LDC. So what you can do is, in terms of adding to the building, I mean, I'm sure this has been covered by somebody else before. This isn't the first time a building has been shared. So I would imagine that the lawyers could get their hands on the documents where this has happened in the past, and they can work through and see how much of this stuff has been already done, so that we don't have to recreate the wheel. But in terms of what you're saying, Tim, yeah, you could have the village appoint 2, the town appoint 2. They'll serve for a period of time, and that'll all be set forth in the agreement that the town and village sign. And you could have each... maybe you have a procedure where the 2 people from each side agree on the 5th person, so you can break the deadlock. You might say that adding to the building is going to require a unanimous vote, unless the municipality looking for the additional space pays for the space themselves. I mean, you might have a lot of things like that. So I think an LDC, from what I know, is one of the methods where you can have private investment in a municipal project and still raise the money through, a bond sale to pay for it. So I think going forward, 75, we should decide what we're going to do. 75, 25, if that's what it is, then we should just try to run that up the pole and see how far we get with it. That's all I'm saying.
Tim forwarded the email from Ken Bond that kind of outlined some of the things that we're looking at. And I do believe he offered to come to a meeting, is that correct? Which I think wouldn't be a bad idea, just to answer a few questions that we might have. And for someone who's giving us this advice, I think it would be good to be able to ask questions and hear it from himself in case he wants to expand on anything. And one thing that I also heard that I'm questioning and a little uncomfortable about is the Wicks law. I don't know why we would be looking to curtail Wicks law.
Reduces construction costs. It's been suggested to us that it reduces our hard costs, our construction costs, by about 25%. Our construction costs are about $8 million on the project, so that means it would save us $2 million that we wouldn't have to borrow and pay debt service on.
This is a surmise. I surmise that if we were in Delaware and we were willing, we would have a corporation by December 1st.
I think the idea of a local development corporation is very enticing, but it's very new. We spoke at our board meeting last week about renting versus owning, and now this week it's about LDCs. I do think that the whole concept of LDCs wouldn't have even been an option on the table had we just run with being a tenant when we had our reservations. And this is where I'm certainly very sensitive, and I appreciate that you want to move things along quickly to keep costs down, but doing your due diligence and doing your research sometimes fleshes out better options, and that's where the LDC may be coming from.
This is not new.
But as far as what we discussed last week,
If you want to be a tenant, that's a possibility. I probably should have listed it here as a fourth option. I thought we had moved past that. It doesn't matter, because
both the village and the town are tenants.
the difference,
I'm sorry, Marty.
if you didn't, if you,
Finish this point.
I'm half Italian, so I'm loud enough. I don't really need the microphone, but anyway. We discussed at this table last week the concept of renting versus owning. We did not discuss LDCs, and now we're discussing it. And I do not think that we need to rush into anything, because LDC would not be an option on the table, because we would have gone very quickly into just being a tenant had we just gone along with everything a month ago.
It's purely a financial structure. There's nothing, the key thing that we were discussing last week continues to be the key thing that we're discussing today, and it's the ratio. So the structure of whether you're you know, it goes back to the question that Rebecca just asked, is why would you consider an LDC? What are the economic advantages? It's just it has nothing to do with whether you rent versus own versus LDC. It's purely just a financial structure. All we're talking about is the ratio that we continue to wrestle with as a village board. But this is not a material discussion that affects the ratio, the LDC structure.
Go off what Dennis is saying. You guys were talking about renting versus owning, and I think you were going towards the feeling that you wanted to rent. You know, you wanted the town to own it, you wanted to rent it. Now, if the town wanted to create an LDC, maybe not, okay, I sort of thought we were looking.
We were split, we didn't decide.
Okay, so then the town sort of decided we were moving forward, and that if you wanted to become a renter, you would jump in, but we'd keep the option open. So, again, I think for the moment, maybe we should take the LDC off the table for the moment for a second, because even if you decided to rent, and the town decided that the best option for us from a financial perspective to move forward is to create an LDC, the town could still do this with, you know, so I think really at the end of the day, it goes back to how do you want to be involved, what percent do you want to be involved, what kind of monetary commitments do you want to make, and then how we structure that deal is the secondary, you know, what's the best deal to put this together, but we haven't even gotten to the point of what you said you hadn't decided last time, which is how much are you in, what percent are you paying for, you know, blah, 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 blah. So I don't think we should get, I mean, I'm hung up on the LDC because it's the first time I heard it, and believe me, we went through this at the county with the nursing home when the executive brought an LDC to the table, and it was a long fight and a long battle, and we ultimately got the LDC, but, you know, again, it's the structure, and we haven't even gotten to the nuances of the deal.
So I think the LDC is simply a structure to share ownership, that's it.
okay, and operate. In terms of the percentages, Tim's right. It doesn't matter if it's 25, if it's 25%, that 25% is the same 25% whether you rent or own, if you think of it that way. Because what you pay is going to be the same that you would pay if you were paying the debt service down on your own bonds. Either you're going to pay the debt service down on your bonds, or you're going to pay the debt service down on our bonds. It's going to be the same percentage, either way.
And Dennis, I think to what you were saying, or asking, if the village said they wished to have a lease, that was also being suggested here, is the town might well still use the LDC vehicle to build the building to keep it cost effective.
You can't do it that way.
Yes, you can.
That's not what Ken Bond told us. He said that the town can't create an LDC on its own, that we would have to create it. We
It has to
would
be
each have to-
partnership, whether it's two municipalities or a municipality and a private enterprise. It's got-
There were no village in this transaction. My understanding is that the town could still create an LDC and operate.
That's
The
not what
county,
Ken
the
was.
county created an LDC for the nursing home.
But they
And we-
created it with
Well,
with
but
joint ownership.
let's go past that though, because that's just the structure. It's the shell. It's the house. What do we want to get shelter from? The threshold still is percentages of ownership, and then the rest is or leasing and ownership. This is the percentage.
But the percentage is going to be the same if you lease or if you own.
Oh, I agree that it is, that to get hung up on, is there an LDC or is there a general contractor brought in who has a PLA? Those are not what we need to come to an understanding on. It's what do you own, what do we own? The rest of it, I think, is just how we get there. But Kevin, you can clarify that perhaps.
You already did it?
Of clarifying on Tony.
Yeah, I agree. It's been a good meeting. I think we're looking at the issues that we have to look at, and I completely agree. It comes down to the percentages. And I have, again, going back to the last joint meeting, I have taken the position that it's to the village's disadvantage to be anything other than a full partner.
Can you just explain to me then, if you see full partnership, which is fine with me, but that means we're full partners 50/50, so all the expenses, all costs of running the building, all the costs of maintaining the building, is shared equally between the two owners and the two partners.
Well, that's I wouldn't necessarily grant that, because if I think operation costs are a different question than ownership of the bricks and mortar. I think someone asked me at our executive committee meeting last weekend, why are you hung up on being an equal partner? And my answer was power. That, the power when it comes to negotiating, power when it comes to figuring out leases, power when it comes to conflict resolution. I think if the town owned 74% of this project, and I were a town board member, I would insist that we have 75% control of decisions. That would be my position. I would be protecting my municipality, in my view. So, and I think whether we start out as 75-25 and these boards, and I think the future boards will get along, looking 20 years into the future, that may not be the case.
I hope we learn to get along, because we have to start learning how to get along. That's what I've learned from my.
Well, I just think that's unicorns and rainbows. I'm starting to believe that.
One other point, I think is great. In my mind, it wouldn't make any sense for the village to be a 50% owner, and then only use 25% of the space. So you'd actually be incurring more cost for your ownership interest than if you just had your interest tied to your percentage of the building.
I think if we looked at ways to figure that out, we can figure that out.
I think that is an awful idea. It is an awful idea to own 50% of a building we've been advised by our treasurer, we've been advised by our general counsel, we don't want to own a 50% stake in this building. There's nothing to be gained. Anything that we need to address regarding your concern about power is addressed in the contract. That is how commercial real estate transactions are handled. The idea that we're going to take on 50% of the debt because we think we're going to benefit from a power perspective is simply wrong. And it's, from a fiduciary perspective, it's a bad decision for village taxpayers. There's no question in my mind about that.
I am tempted to respond in an equally judgmental and borderline personal manner, but I will not. I'll try to keep the tenor of the conversation at a professional level.
You can own 50/50 and rent a quarter of the building to the town.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, and maybe Kevin or Tim has a comment on it. The town runs, for virtual, lack of a better description, 100% of the police department. We can all agree to that. Seems to work. Village has a complaint, they let us know. I haven't heard one in years, but if they would, we would do it. The village runs 100% of the fire department. Seems to have worked for over 100 years. I don't know, seems to kind of work. Recreation, we have a pool that opens and closes successfully every year. Some of the capital improvements on it, we share. We put in some very cool improvements in it. Got a very nice slide down there. Sally Rhodes still owes me a ride down it while smoking a cigarette, but that's a different discussion. She promised she would. So we seem to be able to run the pool pretty darn well with the town taking all the responsibility of the day-to-day, and yet Bill doesn't complain. I'm more than happy, because I'm going to be here, Don, if you guys want to pay for 50% of the building that you're using 25% of. Kevin, tell me if I'm wrong. I'll take that check gladly, and on Tim, I'll gladly take the check, but it doesn't make sense. We do many, many things through many boards, and having sat here now in a third term and watching this government run since the 70s, that we're able to share services and things seem to keep going forward. So Don, I don't understand at all what you're caught up on here, that something is going to go tremendously wrong if you don't have an equal say in what's going to happen in this building. It doesn't seem to, I just don't see the piece. Absolutely.
Make it into the contract.
I agree with you, Tim, completely. You can have an equal say in the contract, as Kevin had pointed out, and I know as our the 2 members of our board have discussed with me about, they can have an equal say. But beyond that, I don't know what we're still discussing here. I don't picture anyone here. We're not selling this business at some time. At the end, we're going to be holding on to it. There's nothing that we're going to be selling, and Tim and Kevin understand that better than us. So I don't see what we're stuck on here.
I'll talk to you, Tim.
And if we do discover gold on this property and we sell this municipal building and it appreciates dramatically, the village residents will still participate because we are town residents.
I want to thank Councilman Logan for making my point. The reason that the town now manages 100% of the police force and the village now manages 100% of the fire department is that they started out doing it jointly, and they couldn't do that well. And at some point, after lots of contention and difficult meetings, it was decided that look at the Moriala pool. I think is another example that it's difficult to make. There's been a lot of conflict about the Moriala pool in recent years. There's been a lot of arguments. You weren't there? Okay. Anyway.
I have to disagree with your comment about the police. What happened, there were two police departments, and then at one point, I think it was, I don't remember exactly, I think then it got merged, but I think the town said the town was paying 60 and the village was paying 40, and the supervisor at the time said he wanted the village to pay 50-50, or if not, the town would take it over. And the brilliant mayor at the time, and I say that with all honesty, said to the town, you can have it. And the town got stuck with 100% of it. So it wasn't,
Went up 30%.
and the bread and everything, and the rates went up 30%. So it wasn't because they weren't getting, they couldn't work together, all that. It was because we had an idiot supervisor who made a pretty big mistake on behalf of the town, and you had a brilliant mayor.
There's no
Okay.
other village-town combination in New York State where you have a SUNY college, where the town funds the police, it's always the village.
So it's not, so it has nothing to do with that. I will agree with you, which I was going to say, to disagree with Jeff, but to agree with him. We have had major problems with Moriello Pool, and I swear to God, from when I was here the first time to when I came here, I used to say it was Groundhog Day. It was like living the same thing over and over and over again. You just couldn't believe that, 20 years later, you're having the same conversation and you want to kill yourself. But what we did do was we sat down and put together a subcommittee that got to work and laid out the ground rules that said, okay, here's what's capital costs, and we're all going to agree on capital costs. And we fought a little bit with Sally Rose at the end, because Sally still refused to accept certain things we thought should be capital costs, but we finally gave just to get it done. But we laid everything out so there was real clarity, so there would be no more fighting, and we had rules of engagement. And so, in that sense, whatever we do, that's what has to be done. And that's why the last time I had spoken to Tim, when I said the town's going to move forward, we're going to move forward, but Tim, this will give you now time with the village to work out the rules of engagement with the town and talk with your lawyers and work on it and put it all together, and then come back and say, does this work for us? And does this work for the village and, for the town? And then let's sign an agreement. You would have the time to work out the details of very legitimate concerns that you have that I agree with, and they need to be worked out, and they need to be put down, and they need to be itemized and concretized, and then you've got to feel comfortable, and we've got to feel comfortable. That's the only way this is going to work. Is that it's all agreed to up front, and we try to vet as much as we possibly can ahead of time.
I think another very important point is whether we are renting from the town, whether we are both renting from an LDC. What we're trying to accomplish here is an agreement that's sorted out in a contract, and Moriello Pool we have an agreement, but we can continue to argue about details.
We don't anymore because we worked it out and came up with clarity. So we don't fight, we haven't fought this entire summer. I don't think we haven't, prior to.
But the point that I'm trying to make is, even with 50-50 co-ownership, even with 25% ownership by the village, or 25% as a renter, and we're paying for 25% of the debt service, we can argue about every single thing if we want to. These structures do not prevent arguing at all. There's no magic bullet to prevent arguing, and a 50-50 co-ownership is not going to do that. So what we need to do is to make the best economic deal for the village as a village board. I think we're actually very lucky that the town is not insisting that we pursue ownership of this building 50-50. But we can continue to argue about details, whether we have co-ownership or not. That's a luxury we can continue to enjoy.
I agree with that, Tim. No, I agree with that. I think the concern is what happens at the end of the argument if one party is an owner and one party is a renter? And what happens at the end of an argument if one party has disproportionate leverage, ownership, whatever you want to say? I called it power, whatever you want. I agree there will be arguments. Conceivably, if we're talking about a 50 or 100-year building, there will be arguments, there'll be disagreements. I'm trying to look to the point where we have a disagreement as municipalities, and I'm trying to come up with a construct that best protects us in the unanticipated situations. We're not going to be able to negotiate and anticipate every single issue we might face over 50 years. So I'm just trying to, put together a structure.
And that's precisely what I've suggested all along, and that's why I suggested that if we have an LDC, for instance, or any sort of board of directors responsible for decision-making, you do 2 village, 2 town, and an at-large person. I think that's a great way to deal with those kind of difficult decisions.
You can label them major decisions. Minor decisions, you won't have the same kind of stuff.
So would the town board, as now, be agreeable to that sort of a composition where there'd be 2 village members and 2 town members on whatever sort of, whether it be an LDC or whatever entity is arrived at?
You're saying 4 town members.
And an at-large. No, I'm saying two village, 2 town, and an at-large.
Don't forget, the village residents are
Well, in our official capacities. No, but I'm saying,
Appointed by each.
that might be a real bit of progress this night.
I just want to point out that there was a time when I was first supervisor that the town board was comprised of 3 village board members. Three village members, 3 people, 3
I think Don was actually trying to get somewhere with his question, so let's continue.
Thank you, Tim.
So you want to know if we agree to that makeup as a structure? That was.
Yeah, that would directly address my concern about 75-25 and the power.
So I can speak for myself, having had this conversation, and say, yes, that I would be fine with that structure.
Can you please clarify? You're saying again, it's almost like a 50-50 ownership, but you're not paying 50% of the building.
You have major decisions that are made by a board that is composed of 2 village, 2 town, and 1 at-large. Major decisions.
Are you talking about village elected officials? Elected officials,
No,
you're talking about residents?
appointed residents to the committee.
No.
No.
The board is 2 elected, 2 elected town officials, 2 elected village officials, and then 1 at large who is it requires agreement of those 4 individuals, and they appoint that at large person.
You have to be large to be at large. You're appointed.
Yeah, then I think that's how I feel.
I think I like the structure.
So that's 2. Marty, I know you had some thoughts on this when we talked about it earlier.
I'm not hung up on it because you can get anything you want by contract. It's the contract that's the important element.
Agreed, but if that was something that made you feel more comfortable in this scenario.
Do it that way.
So that's 3.
No, I'm good. I think
That's 4.
this is, as in anything, the devil will be in the details, and that's what we will have attorneys that represent the village, we will have attorneys that will represent the town, and they will help guide both these boards towards an agreement, and that's where we will then find out. I think the structure of that is, the LDC is, I believe, the more important structure we're looking at next, though.
That's going to be based upon professional opinions.
Sure,
Will.
So to answer your question, there's a majority, and I'm sorry, Susan, do you have a?
I'm not willing to weigh in tonight because this was thrown on the table. This is completely different.
Well, not the LDC part, so
everything
just
about
the
when we
structure
moved
of the-
forward at the last meeting, there was a different dialogue that I had had with everybody as we moved forward. It's completely changed tonight. I'm not saying it's bad, good, whatever. I just feel like this was thrown down, when I walked in tonight, and I'm not prepared to make a decision on this kind of magnitude. I'm just not going to do it.
And I think that's fair, and Susan, I'm not going to disagree with you at all. It's just my comfort level, just so you know where it comes from, because I think, like the majority of everyone here, no one wants anything put in front of them instantly, but I have total faith in the 2 members we've already appointed. So I will speak for my vote now too. Again, I would vote for the 2 member representatives to be the 2 existing members we have right now. So that would be my vote on the town board. And again, I'm only speaking for myself. And that's what I feel like, and Kevin, please, or Tim, and I'm not trying to pick on you guys, but that's what our next move is, right? So I would then say I support 2 members of this board, and then I trust them to then help guide those 4 members to find a fit at-large member.
So you agree in concept then?
Yes, completely.
It's an extension of what we agreed to at our last joint meeting.
I think we've all discussed this.
Yes,
Exactly,
yeah.
Rebecca. I think we've discussed
Right.
this structure.
Exactly. We're just adding a fifth
We're now
person.
going on to this next piece of paper, which I agree with you, Susan, is
Right.
the first time I've seen this, but.
Right.
But that's the LDC piece.
But again, but this piece, I think, is pointing to what four people sitting down together can work on, produce. Which is, this is a lot of work. There's a lot of work when you do this.
So what do we need to do now? Chairs?
Well, I'd like to see how the village is feeling about moving forward with this structure, because I feel like if the town and the village are on the same page in terms of we have representatives from each governmental body, in terms of 2 elected officials from each, and then we agree on a fifth at-large individual, that deals with this power or control concern. And that then gives us the flexibility to not pay for 50% of this building when we're not using 50% of the building.
Are you guys willing to make Kevin?
Well, we could,
That might
No,
be different
that's-
on how I feel about moving forward.
I think I would rather hear, Susan, I hear you, I would rather hear from the four of, I'd like to hear from the 2 elected officials of the village. Right, and the 2 from the town. I think this is way too early to be putting restrictions or covenants on who that 5th member would be. I would want to hear from the executive, what we are right now calling the executive committee.
If we had a meeting on...
I'm sorry, Tim, you understand what I'm saying there?
Yeah.
Okay, good, okay.
If we had a meeting on December 1st and we brought the 4 of us who have been doing this so far, were to bring a recommendation forward on December 1st for that 5th member, would that be consistent with what you're thinking?
I'm not looking for any, but
He
that's.
just didn't want us to pick it right now.
Oh,
Yeah, that's, I apologize, yeah, no,
Yeah, yeah.
I just said, I don't think there should be any covenants on it to say the person has to live within the confines of what we consider the town.
Well, we
only,
will
the
bring it
village only,
forward, if we have a
Right.
meeting on December 1st, we'll bring it forward then, because we need to constitute the board in order to create the LDC.
So, yes, yes.
I need to understand. Maybe I need to understand it from a legal point of view. How can you constitute a board of an LDC in advance of having an LDC?
This is not necessarily a board of an LDC. This is just a group of individuals who will be responsible for making decisions, whether it's via an LDC board or just any other, even if we come up with a different financial structure other than an LDC, we should use this framework of these 5 individuals.
I'm okay with that.
And the LDC kind of, in my mind, is, well, we're going to go to California, how are we going to get there? Are we going to go by car, are we going to go by rocket, or are we going to go by airplane? Any one of those vehicles gets you to California. And
But
an
these
LDC
5
is
people
one-
will be in
they'll
that
be the
rocket
ones-
ship or that car
Exactly.
or that train.
Yep.
Ken
They'll be
Bond
driving
will
it.
help you figure all the little subtleties out in there, in that whole structure.
So did the village agree to that structure? I know we did, but did I hear a formal agreement?
Technically, you
I don't
can
think,
vote.
I don't
We
think,
make a motion, we did an informal conversation.
Right, you did a straw poll, but you didn't know, I just wanted to.
we're just agreeing
Yeah,
concept.
yeah, concept wise, but I just wanted to hear if that's a concept that is.
I agree in concept.
I would like to get confirmation from the village that we can agree conceptually that we're going to have this 5-person group. But then we can also move forward with a smaller stake other than 50% of this building. So we're not being handcuffed to paying 50% of the debt service as a village government.
Well, is that what?
That's, I think, what we're trying to accomplish,
So
but I
we're
just
looking
wanted
for-
to,
we're looking for
I
an
just wanted
agreement
to
in concept.
articulate that.
An agreement in concept. I'm in agreement with that concept.
And I think the question that I posed originally was the composition of a decision-making body. I don't think there was another caveat in there about percentages. I would like not to close that subject out. I mean, Rebecca threw out something, just off the top of her head before. There are possibly ways to I'd like to explore if there are financially viable ways to maintain a 50-50 stake. Rebecca said, I think it might have been joking, maybe we could lease 25% back for the courts or for the police. There might be some way to do it. I'd like to at least look into it. I'd like to ask the question.
I would not. I would like to keep this transaction as plain vanilla as possible. I know the more nuance, the more complicated, the more prone we are to risk, and I do not think that is a good idea. I think you need to identify something that is very straightforward and easy to understand.
And with all due respect, I mean, you can move forward however way you guys want. It really does not matter anymore to me. But honestly, the easiest way to move forward, based on what you said, is for the town to own the building and for the village to like lease their percentage of it. And that's straightforward. That's, you know, the town owns it. It's their headache. It's their problem. It's their building. It's their debt service. You guys get to design, you know, your interior. You know, you pay for the 25% of your interior kind of stuff. That's the easiest thing in the world. And that's the easiest way to move forward. This other way is more complicated, but that's okay. You know, you guys are going to have to work this out.
What's
I
the
just
other
want to
way?
The other way was the town owns the building and you lease, you know, you lease 25% of, you know, the space that you need, and you help design the 25, you know, whatever space you need, which is probably about 25% of the building. You design that space. You know, you pay your rent based on that space. You don't have to worry about, God forbid, you know, all of a sudden there's mold in the building and you got to be remediated or whatever. It's the town's problem. That's the simplest way.
All I'm talking about is we're either taking a minority stake or a 50-50 stake. And I've been suggesting the village takes a minority stake because it makes more economic sense for the village.
And I'm just saying, when you make the comments about trying to make it as simple as vanilla, I'm just saying the LDC or this ownership, it makes it more complicated. That's fine, it's okay. But
We're not dealing with LDC stuff tonight. We're gonna wait until we hear from attorneys who can help us make that decision. But that financial structure, that's not what we're discussing tonight. What we're discussing is a committee structure that we're both comfortable with, that hopefully will speak to the concern of shared responsibilities or shared decision-making. Where we could.
You're asking whether.
Well, you've already,
Yeah,
you're
we already
aligned,
Yeah, I'm asking the village
You
board.
guys, well, that part we're all agreeing with, but you threw in the other caveat about percentages. So why don't we just keep to the first part? And I think we'll.
But that's the reason that we're talking about having this shared decision-making, is so that we can move forward with a minority stake.
That's your motivation. Okay. So I think that if we just answer the first question, we can have agreement on that and consensus and move forward, and that will be a good accomplishment.
I agree. I'm in agreement with the 5-member 2+2+1.
One issue, then you can get to the second one once you get past that, right?
And I would still like to hear further from Ken Bond and any other person who would have something to add to this.
Can we act on the one issue
Sounds like you
as a board?
Are you in agreement with the 5-person?
Yeah.
And you are as well?
Pretty much.
I believe we all are.
Is Dennis? Yes?
So what's the consensus now, so I understand it?
We all like in concept the 2+2+1 structure for
Both sides of the table.
a guiding
Executive committee?
executive, let's call it that, executive committee.
But I thought the reason that we were discussing that is so we could move forward with the concept of the village having a minority stake in terms of ownership, but then still.
They could be two separate.
Sure, fine,
decisions.
you can separate them. So
If
we've
that
done
makes
part
any
A,
sense.
and now I'm discussing part B.
And if indeed we end up with an LDC, are we all agreeing that those same 5 people would become the directors
Yes.
of the LDC?
Yes.
Yeah, good,
So,
that's
yeah.
good, that's
Yeah.
good, we've made a lot of progress so
Yeah.
far.
All right, but it sounds like you want to get to a conversation on percentages.
Yeah,
So-
That's the next one.
Because my only other concern is, and just because I've been through these discussions, I've sat with Ken Bond multiple times on bonding issues, very intelligent man. I would prefer to see those discussions, and then tell me if I'm wrong, I would prefer those discussions to be with the executive committee and hear reports back from the executive committee. Because I would hope the executive committee, and again, I will just speak for the two members we have from the town board, I have all confidence that they will reach out to us, and as a town board, we'll discuss with them our concerns, translate them to whether it be legal advice from an attorney, which we haven't, I don't believe we've selected any attorney yet. For this whole, I mean, maybe Joe Moriello, let's just use that.
Ken Bond would probably.
Ken Bond as a finance attorney, and then also I am trusting them to also speak with Joseph Horowitz. We're trying to, I like Tim's term of vanilla. We're trying to design a structure that works very simply for this community at a very reasonable cost.
I think you're right eventually, but initially, I think every trustee and every board member needs to understand equally what we're getting ourselves into. After everybody understands and they're willing to designate or delegate the authority, I think you're okay at that point. But I think everybody should hear from Ken.
I agree. It was Rebecca who said she had some questions for Ken Bond, and she wouldn't be part of that group, so I want her to, you know.
Okay, I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
So do you think it would be best for you, Rebecca, to be on a phone call with Ken Bond, or for you to feed your questions to?
I think you bring him towards me.
I think you should bring him, yeah, I'd like to bring him.
Everybody will have questions for him.
He said he was available
Yes.
to attend our village meeting on November 18th, which is next Wednesday, but that doesn't,
Could we talk a little bit about the timeline, and then that will help me formulate how I might respond to
Right.
different meeting dates? On December 1st, we're going to have the programming report from Joe Horowitz. And on December 1st, we're going to have the programming report from Joe Horowitz. And clearly, we're all going to work together. So it's easy then, I believe, to tell him to just charge ahead and do his schematic designs, assuming that the village and the town are going to be doing this together. There's a risk, and the risk is we don't ever come to an agreement on the percentages, our relationship falls apart. Now, up until the point where there's some other vehicle, it's the town that's financially footing the bill. And the moment we have agreed formally on the percentage of ownership, then the footing the bill would be split between us however we all agree. And I just don't wish to see Joe Horowitz's progress stalled on December 1st because there's something that we haven't done that we needed to do because we put off doing it. And it could take some advice from you.
And I would have Ken Bond in here way before December 1.
That's my feeling. And then I would suggest that we perhaps ask the village if we could join their meeting on the 18th, or if we could come up with some joint meeting date that's around the 18th, and still do the 21st, so that on the 21st we can take action after we've become informed on the 18th, assuming that we become satisfied in that information.
The 21st is what? Is that town board meeting? What's the 21st?
First.
Oh, December 1st. I'm sorry. Yes, thanks for correcting me.
So are you gonna invite Ken Bond to the meeting on the 18th?
Ken Bond's already available. He's committed to coming to New Paltz on November 18th.
So I don't think we have to formalize that as a joint meeting. I mean, I know I certainly can attend and won't be there.
Right, yeah, and, you know, if anything, you could watch from home or watch reruns.
Well, it would be good for the town board to be able to dialogue with them
Oh,
also,
absolutely,
so we
yes.
hope
Sure, they
that
would
we
grant
would be
us that
invited
courtesy.
to.
But isn't it, so the purpose of that discussion is to investigate LDC versus something else, correct?
To answer any questions that anybody has about the LDC form and
And-
about our
Conceptual agreement.
Just general financial questions. I
Yes.
don't want to limit it to LDC.
Yeah,
Just
that's
general
fine.
financial and bonding and financing questions.
Sounds great.
Should we notice it as a joint meeting?
Or do we want to have a village meeting and just invite them to interact if they want to?
Well, if we did it as a joint meeting, should something come up, we could add. Sure. And I think it's just a matter of us. Sure. We have a forum here that's interested in making it a joint meeting. I would be in favor of that with the village's approval. So
If you think we're gonna take action and a majority of the board can make it, that's fine.
I can make it.
I can make it.
And just so you know, the December 1st meeting, I will be late. I have a work engagement that's gonna go run a little later.
Up until when?
It could be 8 o'clock, but it won't be that bad.
So if we started at
December 1st.
7:30 instead of 7, maybe
That
on the
sounds,
1st?
that would be good,
Would that be
yeah.
okay? It's a little less likely that you'll be late, or you won't be as late.
Right, yeah.
I can't commit to being there, but it doesn't matter if you have it
Kevin, or would you be available?
Not late.
And I was available.
All right.
So,
That's
So
good.
we'll notice it as a joint.
Do we have to take it
So
back
two joint
here
meet-
after that?
The clerk will
But
notice it.
where are you holding the first, holding it on the first? Are you holding it at town, at the community center?
You have to make sure that.
7 o'clock?
That it's free.
Same time?
I think they just mentioned 7:30.
It is, the 18th, as far as I know, right at this moment, is available. I don't see a meeting,
Well,
but I could
We'll
be
be here.
here.
The 18th, we're already here. So we're talking about December 1st.
And
I apologize, I thought we were the 18th.
And I've
but
been trying
I'm
for
still
4 minutes,
at
I can't get onto the village
No,
calendar.
we're
to
gonna be
see
here for a
why-
village board
There's
meeting.
absolutely a planning board meeting that evening, I don't know if there's anything else planned,
Right,
I've
okay.
been trying to get on.
Well, I did warn about December 1st.
So we could agree to December 1st, subject to Roseanne confirming it.
Sounds good.
So do that at the community center?
Yeah, tentative December 1st date.
And you want to do 7:30?
Yeah,
Yes.
usually we do 7:30, and that'll help with that.
I believe it is available. I think we should, because I believe the ZBA needs to cancel their meeting on the second Tuesday. I believe it's available. I believe December
Do we need a
1st.
formal motion for that, or we just?
Oh, you definitely need a formal.
So
one.
moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 And I make the motion on behalf of the village board.
Second.
And the motion is we have a joint meeting on the 1st?
Yeah.
At 7:30 at the community center.
7:30 at the
Okay.
community center.
Second.
Pending the
Or did you already
confirmation
second?
from Roseanne.
Did,
Aye.
Aye.
okay, so we're done with this topic. Want to talk fire district?
Wait,
But wait.
before you go on, you should actually formally decide to invite them to the 18th, and they
Yes.
should agree to come for the sake of noticing. I know it's
Yes.
pesky, but it covers everybody appropriately.
So move to appoint,
For 7 PM?
I move to invite
Oh,
the town
look at
board
Only if you bring.
Second.
to our November 18th meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We accept the invitation of the village board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, that way it makes it very tidy for
Good
noticing.
Good that you're paying attention to
Oh,
details.
I believe me, I'm sitting there like,
Nice.
Fire district.
Next.
fire district, are we on to that? I have sent out emails, I'm sorry that this is so loud, to the 4 members that we've identified to be part of the team. And I think the only person I didn't hear from was Jeff, but in the past, we had suggested Tuesday meetings, which is when we were meeting. Are those still good for you?
Did you send me the dates?
I did send out dates once, I'll do it again, yeah.
Just want to get dates, yeah.
Okay, all right, yeah, so probably a Tuesday that doesn't conflict with planning or zoning meetings. So,
Those are right. Tuesdays are usually the ZBA, which is second Tuesday.
Right.
And anything after 7:30.
okay,
Do you want to
sounds
set
good.
the date right now, actually?
Yeah, that works, Tuesdays are good for me.
Okay. So I'm good, just pick a day that works and I'll
Jeff,
be
you
there.
want to pick a day?
I think we just killed November and December, didn't we?
Are we gonna have more of a discussion on the fire district?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah. I think we just killed it once. Because December, you're in the holidays now.
Yeah.
I think we should hold off on picking dates because we just booked our Novembers and Decembers, plus I still have planning board and zoning, I still have ZBA meetings.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
board meetings.
yes, how about if you, I was just going to suggest that, why don't you send us some January dates?
You got it, done.
So what's the thinking on the fire district? I'm sorry, Rebecca. What's the thinking on the fire district? Is there an overall concept where the thinking is that they want to build a new building to house the fire department? Will it be a paid or non-paid company? Thank you. I've talked to a couple of people on the other side of the river, and they indicated that a couple of them were fire districts, but it was still volunteer firemen. But some fire departments did agree to pay drivers. So there's a lot of different models out there, and I was just wondering what model we're going to try to pursue here, and what research has been done to spread the cost now, because you can, to the college and these other users of services. So has anybody run any numbers or anything like that? Has anybody developed a proposed budget, or?
We have looked at, we have had presentations in the past that basically gave us ideas of other companies, and Will Frank, the village attorney, has also developed fire district resolutions and plans for other communities, and he has shared some of these things with me in the past, but not in a while. And since then, I have found other companies that have adopted fire districts. I haven't fully researched what the differences were in terms of budget to budget. But from what I see here, I have not heard any intention of going to paid drivers or paid, any members. I don't think that it's been discussed, it's been brought up a few times, but I don't think that is something that would be an immediate goal of forming a district.
My suggestion would be that they actually include that as part of their plan, so that everybody's familiar with where they're going to go with this.
Right.
And I'd really like to see a breakdown on the basis of the current cost sharing between the village and the town, total budget, because I think some of it they fundraise as well, right? A little bit.
Yeah.
So total budget, and then see, even with the cost of debt service on a building, because you're spreading now to a bigger pool, what it might look like from both the town and the village. It might be neutral, who knows?
I'd really like to step back a little bit from this conversation from the perspective of, and let me just first say that I'm not against a fire district per se, especially with the cap environment, and if you get the fire department to agree that this is the existing budget, that you start with, I'm not adverse to it per se. What I have a real problem with is, though, for the past, I've been in office 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, when consolidation was being discussed, the village was really, really clear that they didn't want to dissolve the village because we'd end up getting a fire district, and they didn't want a fire district. And so the town and the village applied before I came back, for a joint grant, for $50,000 that they got from the state, and spent all this time and came up with a recommendation that it has to be a townwide village because we have to keep the village because we'll end up with a fire district, and we don't want a fire district. And a lot of time and money was spent to come up with this townwide village concept, which in of itself was complicated also, and I don't even have to tell everybody how that turned out in a sense. So all of a sudden, where the village was constantly saying and the community was saying we don't want a fire district, and we have to keep the village, now all of a sudden we're keeping the village, but now all of a sudden we're talking about a fire district. So I just don't see how the lines got connected, in all honesty. And my only other comment, and then again I'm going to take myself out of the conversation because I won't be here when you make the decision, so it doesn't really matter what I think. But let me just say, so it's on the record, that what again the fire district does, it does help the fire department, I understand it, I understand why they want it, don't take me wrong. But from a taxpayer's perspective, it's just cost shifting once again to the town outside the village town residents, because what you have right now is you have a fire department that's split equally between the town and the village based on calls, and it's pretty 50-50. So the village residents pay 50, and then the town residents, through our, we raise our separate fire budget, to our town outside the village residents. And stuff, well, actually, it goes on the A fund, I think, I'm not sure how it goes. But the point being is that at the end of the day, once you shift this to a fire district, it goes completely onto the A fund, and then the village residents will pay 26% of the 100%, and the town outside the village residents will pay the 74%. And once again, cost shifting to the town outside the village residents have happened, and you take it off of your bottom line, and the town outside the village residents, once again, are paying for most of the services for this community, for the police, for the fire, for the rescue, for recreation, for whatever. And I just think people need to just know that and have that clarity as you move forward.
Just to follow up on that, that's the percentages you just discussed are true, but that's because the college is wholly exempt, and the college represents actually over $400 million of assessed value that's off the tax rolls. But I'm pretty sure that your fire district can require the college to contribute based upon its assessed value. So you may eliminate some of that disparity that you talked about. But there's a real big, open-ended issue here, which is, and everybody has to be aware of it, once you turn over the authority to the commissioners, they're autonomous. So if they decide they want to go to a paid fire district, we don't control that decision. It becomes a paid fire district, which then could involve lots of additional costs. I'm just saying that it's really got to be thought out well in advance, because it could just, in our town, $75,000 represents 1% of our tax raise. Is that about right, Susan? 7.5 million tax levy? So, those 75s add up, and I know that the library just got an additional X dollars. So these 1% start adding up, and the tax picture here is already overwhelming. And so I'm going to just leave it at that. You really have to crunch your numbers to show that it's not going to be another hardship on the community.
And also with that, basically, it would not be the two boards or the committee that we formed that would make the decision to convert to that form. It would have to go up for referendum. So ultimately, the voters are the ones who decide. So whatever package, whatever plan you're putting together, ultimately, it's the voters who decide, not us.
Any other, you want to comment, fire district?
The fire district, and Kevin, you bring up a very valid point. We've watched one of our emergency services here go from a couple paid people to now we have many paid people in it. And it is very easy to happen when it's its own self-governing board, and it becomes a very expensive proposition. They have the advantage of being able to do recoverables. A fire department cannot recover its expenses except from its very community base. You are lucky in New York State. The times the polls are open for the budgets are measured in a few hours. They are held in they don't have the requirements of HAVLA. They don't have the requirements of multiple polling places. And you're lucky if you get 1% of your populace out to vote on, and Tim, you can look these numbers up on fire districts. It's awful who shows up to vote when it comes to voting on the budgets of fire districts and on the commissioners. It's a completely different time of year. Their budgets run at different cycles, and the commissioners also run during the same time as the budget. It's not a great system that New York State has set up. We're also looking directly into the face of New York State, which is trying to consolidate governments adding another layer of government. There's no other way about it. You're adding another taxing entity to our community. We have plenty of taxing entities in this community. The library is now showing it's being a pretty serious taxing entity. Their budget's going to be over $500,000 before we know it. Our total budget in the town, you're looking at $11 million, $12 million, and now you're going to have one entity here that's now another $500,000. We have the school district as a taxing entity. We have the village. We have the town. Now you're going to add a fire department. So to Kevin's point, we really seriously need to look at it. This was proposed again in 2010, and Terrence Hannigan came up and gave his proposal, which I think I've seen now 3 or 4 times, and I look forward to seeing his "aw shucks, I'm just a country boy who's a fireman, and this is really the way to go." Well, again, I've seen the same show 4 times and it hasn't changed. He's an attorney that makes his living off of representing fire districts, which is another form of government. So I am more than happy to sit and discuss it again and see where it's going. But we have a system that has been running for well over 100 years with great success. And to me, at first blush, we're trying to fix something that's not broken and has worked very well in this community. I've had family members serve as firemen. My grandfather was a fireman in this community going back to the days when one of the fire stations was down on Chestnut Street. So it's a long history in this community and it's running very well. Part of it can also be maybe we should be looking jointly at building a fire and or emergency service building. I know Susan worked very hard on that for a while, and using some funding for that was going to be available. I don't know if it's still available, but there are mechanisms. So I hope when we meet, we're not just going to be discussing just fire district, but what are their needs that this community is not meeting? And is there a fiscal reason for we're looking at this to grow government when the state is doing everything possible to try to get us to reduce our government, not to grow our governments and our taxing entities?
Any other fire district comments before we talk about comprehensive master plan? Nope. Okay. So we started discussing comprehensive master plan committee, and we wanted to wait until Jeff and Susan arrived just so they could share any input. But where we were at was using the resolution that I think it was actually Tom and Jeff.
Jeff and I authored that resolution
Way back.
2.5 years ago.
Right. So the thinking is we're going to stick with the spirit of that resolution, update the dates, and Marty suggested modifying the dollar amount that both the town and the village would commit to. It was up to $25K. In the language we had, it was up to $26K. And Marty and I had worked on identifying 9 individuals from the community who would serve as the working group to draft a RFP to select a third-party consultant, and then to be the group that reviews that consultant's work and reports back to both the town and the village boards during the approximately 12-month period that the third-party consultant is doing their work. But we went over the names, and what I was looking to do this evening was to basically have both the town and the village appoint the same individuals to this 9-person working committee. I can review the names again. Yeah, so the town board member would be Adele Ruger. The village board member would be...
I'm sorry, planning board member.
Planning board.
Sorry, absolutely. Planning board member would be Adele Ruger. Village planning board member, we are still working on a name. Historic Huguenot Street representative, that task is going to be shared between Marietta Schneider and Josephine Bloodgood. Bob Hughes would also be on this Working Committee, Gail Gallery, Fran Wishnick, Bill Murray, Rich Gottlieb, and Peter Fairweather. So that gets you to 9, and then both the town and the village would have a liaison with no voting influence. But the concept is move forward with the resolution to say we're going to work on this joint comprehensive plan and then have this 9-person committee.
2 questions, one for the town board and just one, I don't know who Bill Murray is.
He is, he's got an architectural background. He lives on Prospect Street. We actually recently appointed him as an alternate to our planning board.
Is he Murray Associates? Is that when we've seen plans from him? Is he?
You know, I'm not sure. I don't think so. I don't think he does a lot of work in this area. I think he does a lot of work in the city related to arts-related projects. Do you, for some reason I'm guessing because you're Prospect Street, do you know Bill a little bit better?
No, not
Professionally? Okay.
Is he M-U-A-R-Y? M-U-A-R-Y or M-U-R-R?
Same as the guy from
The
the movies.
Okay, I know that.
The only other question I have is for the town board, and I know that you wanted Adele on the planning, as the person, and I think Adele would be fantastic, and I know Adele really wants to do it. So the only thing I would ask of the town board is Adele's appointment on the planning board comes up at the end of the year. So she has reapplied, she asked to be on it, I think the planning board would like her to stay on it. So if we're gonna move forward with this, I would like for the board tonight I'd like to make a motion to reappoint Adele Ruger for a new term on the planning board. Can I have a second for discussion?
Second.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is appoint her tonight, so then she's staying on the planning board, and so when we appoint this committee tonight, and they get started, we don't have to find ourselves replacing Adele.
She's your PB person already.
She's a planning board person already, but we just would need to reappoint her, so we know that she's gonna have tenure on this committee. I know she wants it, I'd like to reappoint her, so the board is okay about doing that.
I have no problem reappointing Adele, but is it all right to appoint someone when their term's not yet up? Once the term expires in January?
It's December 31st, so, and she already was asked by Kelly to, if she was interested to reapply, and she already sent a letter to the planning board, and I think possibly to the town board.
So actually, traditionally, Dan, what we've done is we've always reappointed prior. So for example, I thought we were going to wait until our meeting, but it's fine.
Well, it's just-
But so for
it's just-
example, with Dan on the ZBA, we have 2 members, the chair being one of them. We need to reappoint them, or potentially you're going into January 1st.
I see what you're saying, there's the gap.
So what we do is, and I'm fine doing it tonight. I thought we were going to do them all because we had, just so everyone, that we have 2 members on the ZBA, one of them actually being the chair, we have to reappoint also.
Which I'm just saying I'd like
Yeah.
to do it tonight, because if we're going to make a motion tonight to designate this committee. Okay, all in favor of reappointing?
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
motion's so carried, so now I feel more
Thank you,
comfortable.
thank you, Adele.
It sounds like we also feel comfortable
Sure.
going forward with the committee that you outlined
Yes.
as well.
So I'd like to make a motion that we appoint these 9 individuals.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
So I'd like to make a motion that we appoint the same 9 individuals.
Everyone wants a second?
All in favor? I'd like to build the town board also to, I'd like to make a motion that the town board representative be, no, town board.
Oh, town representative to represent,
The,
committee?
yeah, I'm not using my name purposely, I'm hoping 2 of the other members that are here, one of them might be in. Or,
Why don't we hold off on it?
can we hold, if you guys are okay holding up, I don't picture having the time to.
Could I make a suggestion?
Choose something.
I met with this group when Tim brought us together. I'd be willing to just continue to meet with them if there are any more meetings between now and January 1st, and then in our reorg meeting, somebody can be appointed.
So you have a good placeholder, Marty Irwin.
That would be
Great, that sounds good. And I don't think we need a motion for
So
that.
a non-motion that will be a placeholder for the town board then.
Great.
Thank you, Marty.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do we want to discuss the liaison? Do you want to be the liaison, Tom?
Tom does look excited.
You have a little bit of master plan experience.
I have some master plan experience. Actually, I was thinking that Adele was on the committee that, Del Ruga, that is, was on the committee, that, the Citizens Review Committee on the master plan when I first arrived in the village, and someone suggested I might do that.
Look where that got you.
Look where that got.
And Tom, I apologize, I'm just not doing it just because of two other major
Yeah.
projects we have coming up.
All right, I will certainly be, our liaison to the planning committee, unless and until there is a formal motion.
Okay, I'd like to appoint Tom as the liaison to this working group.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And I imagine any one of us are welcome to attend.
Absolutely.
For sure.
I plan on attending
So,
these
or, yeah,
meetings.
I may attend with you to some of them, I just, it would not, I just, not that I don't love you, Tom, and spend.
I got it.
I have other projects that are getting larger, not smaller.
We've done well together.
Yes, we have. Thank you, sir.
That's the question.
Anybody else have topics or comments before we adjourn?
Not a
I'd like to
chance.
know both, though.
Make a motion to, oh, Susan does.
Did you do the New York Rising before I got here?
We did.
Okay, because I thought Kevin said we pushed it.
No, just that number 3.
Okay, so you pushed it, you did the New York Rising.
We did New York Rising, and you guys are gonna send a letter of support regarding these grant apps. I'll get that to you.
If you can get it to Carol.
Yep.
Move that the village.
Village adjourned.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I'd like to make a motion to town adjourn the meeting. Second. All in favor? Aye.
I brought up the conversation with them last time. Because we need,
Which one?
we need to self-manage.